So without further ado, I am very pleased to welcome you. My name is Rachael Kupka. I'm the Acting Executive Director of the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution. And this is the third webinar that we're having this October to support awareness raising around lead pollution and lead poisoning globally as part of our lead poisoning prevention week that's happening next week. This webinar is on the sources and strategies to reduce lead exposures in Africa. And I'm really pleased to introduce to you a very well-known and renowned panel, a series of panelists. And I would also, before I introduce you to them, I would like to thank the Clarios Foundation for making this webinar series possible. They have been supporting Pure Earth and along with UNICEF for a very important initiative to combat childhood lead poisoning in 5 countries globally. And as part of that work, they are supporting GAP's ability to raise awareness on this issue. So thank you very, very much to Clarios Foundation. So I'm pleased to introduce to you Dr. Jack Caravanos, who's a longtime technical advisor with Pure Earth and also with GAP. He's a clinical professor of global environmental public health at the College of Global Public Health at New York University. He got his master's degree in environmental health engineering from NYU's Tandon School of Engineering and his doctorate from Columbia University. He is a very well-known author on many, many scientific publications and textbooks. He's been an invited speaker at many international conferences on environmental occupational health. He is a well-known global expert on toxic waste sites and remediation in many low and middle income countries. So please, Jack, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rachael, for that kind introduction, and welcome everybody. I'm very happy to be here among esteemed colleagues and friends. I hope to see you all soon in 2022. I am traveling to Africa, so I'm excited about all that. So my goal today is to sort of introduce you to some of the issues in the continent of Africa and specifically some of the countries, and then we'll do a deeper dive in some of this. We are going to start just by sort of acknowledging that WHO did a very nice report in 2015 on lead exposure in African countries. And a lot has happened since then. This stimulates a great deal of research. And essentially, I want to go over some of the highlights in this. This seminar will focus particularly on the largest threat to human health, which would be used lead acid batteries and the exposure in these communities. But I'll also touch upon some of the other issues. We all know about Accra, Ghana, and Ugbor. I've been there many times with friends doing assessments, and the situation there is still dire. It's being investigated. All sorts of other exposures are going on. The soil, is contaminated with lead from the lead-containing covering on the plastic, on the copper wire. However, some of my last visits, I did test some of the cooking pots, and what we have is lead being used as expected as a alloy in aluminum to make molding these pots easier and more efficient. So we are seeing contamination of some of the aluminum products there. In Morocco, in Fez and other cities, we all know the colors of this country, and many of these pigments do contain lead chromates and lead inorganic lead compounds, which adds to the beautiful colors of Africa in general. However, they also pose a bit of a risk. So there are published reports now of lead pottery being attributed to elevated blood leads in these countries. In Nigeria, what can I say? We all know so well about the horror of Zamfara and what happened there. Unfortunately, the situation, while better than it was, is still not completely remedied. There are many, many researchers looking at continued poisoning there. And one sad aspect is we really don't know how many children were really affected. Some people say 400, some people say over 1,000. But this is between this and some of the other countries, we have lead fatalities, which is rather rare. There are reports in the scientific literature of lead exposure in mechanics, auto mechanics in Ethiopia, in Addis. And this is, there were a couple of reports over the last couple of years. So the picture on the left, of course, is typical of some of these conditions. But in low and middle income countries, the resale of radiators and auto parts is pervasive. And of course, there's lead in many of these components, especially in the soldering process. Château-sur-Mer in Senegal, in the capital city of Dakar, is a site that we worked in. I've been there several times. I'm going there actually next month to do a follow-up lead testing of this used lead acid battery community. While things are better, on my last visit, I didn't find too much lead contaminated soil. We want to do a follow-up of the children in this community and assess it a little further. So that is another effort. In Durban, and you notice I'm all over the place, both in the continent and the exposures, because this is the point of our presentation, is that it's not a single exposure. There are a lot of exposures, but there are dominant ones. But Ayurvedic medications and drugs, whether they're imported from India or produced in Durban in South Africa, is still an issue. I want to thank my colleague, Dr. Paramita Hore from New York City Department of Health. She's online. Thank you for lending me this slide. Look at these numbers: 89,000 parts per million, 47,000 blood leads in the 90s, over 100 for adults. This would be fatal levels practically for children. And this is still happening. New York City has a very aggressive program of monitoring some of these other sources of lead. And I'm always shocked when she shares with me some of this data. So Zambia, we all know the issues in Zambia. The mining is, while technically the legal mining, the extraction of the ore has really stopped, people are doing secondary extraction, meaning mining the waste from the processing of the ore. So what you see here is sustenance mining, subsistence mining, where people are digging out rocks which have 10–20% lead and trying to get some money for food. We also, interestingly enough, I wanted to mention that geophagia, the practice of eating earth or stones or clay, is very pervasive in this continent, and I always inquire about this. I did test the materials you see on the bottom right of your screen, and it was about 100 parts per million of lead in there. Now, that's not a very high level, but of course, these are usually pregnant women that have this desire to consume this material. And of course, Egypt, the land of coal and lead sulfide and makeup and the dark eyeshadows. Look at some of these numbers in the material of surma and coal. Again, thank you, Paramita, for the slide. And it really is just remarkable. This is 362,000 ppm of lead. Is 36% of that material is pure lead. So these are very high numbers. Of course, the exposures are, we're not really consuming this, right? It goes on our face, but of course there could be exposure afterwards. So what we have is a continent that both relies on a lot of countries for support, but also exports a great deal of material. And what we have is essentially spices from this continent being exported. And you may have been reading about these other sources of lead in turmeric and saffron and chili. And I just want you to glance at some of these numbers and the respective blood lead levels. Even though we don't use a lot of spice in a food, the high concentration does present excessive risk. And even this stuff does get to high income countries. In this case, eye cosmetic from Nigeria going to Boston, poisoning a child being reported. So whether it's Ayurvedics or spices or religious powders, we have so many of these other sources that we're all trying to slowly get under control. I just want to share with you that once upon a time, a level of 60 was considered normal, safe, acceptable. This number has steadily gone down over the years so that we now, in 1991, a level of 10, I think that's a number many of you remember. We call this level of concern. Many of us translated this to elevated blood leads. But now we are at a different type of standard, and the realization that any amount of lead in blood is unacceptable. And this number, of course, now is 5 in 2012. However, there is likelihood that this will one day be reduced even more because the number is based on a percentage of children in the US that are poisoned, and try and stay below that level. So we may actually see it down to 3.5 sooner than later, which means essentially that we want to get all these countries, and not just high income, low income, all countries developing surveillance programs so we see what we have. So Erickson et al., Brett Erickson published a very detailed analysis of this data. What you're looking at, of course, are some of the high points. You see the dark color there is 7 micrograms and above. I think what I intend by this slide is to show you the gray areas, and that's where we need to do more research. And notice there's a lot of gray areas in the continent of Africa, as well as the stands. And this is what we just need to do much more work. We don't really know the average blood lead levels of many, many countries. And this is where I'm encouraging more research and funding for this. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. I think I have 30 seconds left. So thank you, and I'll be here for questions. I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Jack. That was really, really informational, and I hadn't realized the extent of all the different sources, because there were certainly some new ones here for me to learn about. So thank you for that presentation. And it actually was so engaging that I completely forgot to check the time. So well done. I'm now very pleased to introduce to you Ms. Elsie Appeadu and Mr. Wilson Baaku, who are splitting this next presentation. They both work at Pure Earth. Elsie is the country director and Wilson is the technical director for the Ghana team. They have completed extensive country assessments of lead exposures in Ghana, and the two are currently leading field assessment of lead exposures at sites contaminated by used lead acid batteries and e-waste activities in Ghana. They have participated in a number of expert group discussions to promote responsible used lead acid battery management in Ghana, and they are both very passionate about interventions to reduce or totally eliminate the risk posed by pollution through sustainable management of used lead acid batteries. So, and in addition, they have been working on sensitization or awareness raising campaigns about the risks of lead and lead exposures in schools and health centers across Ghana. Please, over to you.
Thank you, Rachael. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to talk about lead exposure from used lead acid batteries recycling in Ghana. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to take you through our outline quickly. We're going to start off by talking about the background of Elapsed recycling in Ghana, and then we'll move on to the next part, which would address the pathways of lead exposure through the Elapsed recycling. And that we'll have some subtopics. And then the third part, we'll talk about poor Elapsed melting procedures, also with some subtopics under that. So I will talk about the background of Elapsed recycling in Ghana, and my colleague Wilson will take the rest. Okay. Taking a look at the background of Elapsed recycling in Ghana. Okay, so in Ghana, increased ownership of vehicles. We have a lot of people owning more vehicles now. We also have frequent blackouts. There's a term for it in Ghana known as doomsaw. And there's also increased industrialization. All of this have resulted in an increased availability for the need for used lead acid batteries to satisfy our personal, domestic, and industrial needs. Ghana, however, does not have a battery manufacturing company, so we end up importing all of our battery needs into the country. And because of this, because of the fact that there's a lot of recycling over and over, used batteries have a very quick end of life cycle. And then the recycling of used lead acid batteries become economically viable as a means of continuous use of batteries, even after their end of life. In Ghana, the recycling of the ULABs have been identified as the main source of lead exposure in Ghana. So we do have various sources of lead exposure, but the major one of concern has to do with the ULABs. The haphazard collection, storage, transportation, uncontrolled battery breaking, acid drainage, and lead smelting are sources of extreme lead pollution. So all of these have to do with the ULABs. Next slide, please. All right, it's also interesting to note that 97% of the recycling industry of ULABs in Ghana are informal, and only 3% fall under the formal sector. Further studies have shown that children are unfortunately also engaged in the collection of ULABs in Ghana. And the collection of the ULABs is considered as informal in Ghana, hence does not require any permit. So you find it to be a very rampant and very popular practice in Ghana. The informal recycling sector has experienced a dramatic shift in activity focus, and this is explained below by the fact that the informal sector operators previously used to collect and recycle these batteries, but now are resorting to collection, storage, and transportation so that they can sell it to the formal sector operators to recycle. So I'll hand over to my colleague Wilson now to continue with the other parts. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsie. Next slide. So in Ghana, most of our waste are not really sorted. So ULABs also come as part of our e-waste. So this means that ULABs have constituted a major component of Ghana's growing waste. In this form, they are disposed in people's backyards, fitting shops, and even the collectors that go for them are also exposed. And the recyclers who finally receive these ULAB materials also are exposed. And unfortunately, communities where these ULAB materials are also disposed of also experience some exposure, including children as well. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so some of the pathways that lead is exposed through ULAB recycling in Ghana are essentially by environmental emissions. These can occur at various parts of the recycling process. In Ghana, we have had reports of lead particles and fumes being emitted into the air, which can be or had been inhaled by people nearby. We've also seen lead dust, which are also deposited onto soil and onto water bodies and on other surfaces. Most particularly also, we've had waste materials which are not disposed of properly, leading into contaminated land and onto water bodies. High acid concentrations are also dumped on land or released into waterways, and in some cases also entering our food chain through a popular practice in most parts of our urban areas where food is grown on contaminated land. Next slide. We will look closely at various stages of the ULAB recycling where exposure had been reported. Precisely from the background, we noticed that because collection of ULAB materials is informal, this has necessitated a widespread network of poorly regulated ULABs collection in most communities in Ghana. Perhaps the driving force behind these network is the commercial value ULAB has attained over the period. These networks even extend far into neighboring countries of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, all bringing their materials down to Ghana for sale. This unsound collection actually exposes many workers, local communities, to lead particles and other materials. Next slide. Another way of lead exposure, very popular in Ghana, is the mode of transportation. Once the materials are collected, they are usually packed into the back of vehicles, as we have seen in the picture at the left corner of this slide. Being hazardous and packed in this kind of manner during transportation, there's usually leakage of materials during transport. Other leakages include the electrolyte that may also pose exposure to handlers and to workers at the smelting industry. Next slide. Okay, storage has also been another source of huge exposure in Ghana. In many cases, ULAB materials collected are stored in what we call kiosks, containers, and sometimes in open spaces at people's backyard and fitting shops. So poor handling and storage also causes exposure to lead. Next slide. Unfortunately, breaking or separating of the materials has also been a great source of exposure, where manual slashing is normally used by some of the informal sector players. Next slide. In the picture, in the next slide, we see, keep going. Yes, an example of a manual slashing, and also the right one, the draining of the battery fluid in an acceptable way. Next slide. So another source is that in most homes in Ghana, we tend to use plastic products, which sometimes are also produced from the plastic casings of these ULAB materials by the informal sector. Next slide. Next one. Okay, so these are some examples of bad smelting procedures used by informal sectors in Ghana and other places. Next slide. So another source of discharge into the atmosphere during smelting. Next one. This is another form of bad practice where effluent discharges are made into the environment under poor conditions. Next one. Yes, we have here poor storage of charging materials during smelting, which has also been sources of concern for the regulatory authorities in Ghana. Next one. So, yes, these are finance residues, also classified as hazardous, which are deposited onto unacceptable spaces in Ghana. Next one. So I think this brings us a quick view of some of the exposure sources that we experience through informal and formal ULAB recycling in Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilson and Elsie, for that presentation. I mean, we can see that there are many points that need to be controlled to prevent pollution and emission of lead particles and battery acid and others into the environment where people are being exposed. I was also really struck by the transboundary impact of ULABs being transported into Ghana for processing in the informal sector. And of course, we have the Basel Convention to try to prevent that or make sure it's done correctly. But this is a really interesting point, and I hope that we might be able to better understand the volumes coming in and out of these different countries quite soon. Next, I am really pleased to introduce Mr. Andreas Manhart and Dr. Sampson Atiemo, who will be presenting together. Mr. Manhart is a senior researcher at Oeko Institute, and he's been working on circular economy, waste management, and recycling projects for 16 years. His key focus is on management of implementation projects that help to reduce pollution while improving the livelihoods of the communities around. Mr. Manhart maintains a broad network of researchers, policymakers, recyclers, and civil society groups in many of the regions of the world, but he has a particular emphasis on Europe and Africa. Dr. Atiemo has more than 10 years of experience as a researcher and implementer of various e-waste projects in Ghana. He's worked extensively with the formal and informal sector, as well as policymakers. He holds a doctorate in nuclear and environmental protection from the University in Ghana and has traveled extensively to several countries where he's studied different e-waste management systems. Currently, Dr. Atiemo is the local coordinator for the Sustainable Recycling Industry Program funded by the Swiss government and implemented through the Ministry of Environment, Science, and Technology and Innovation through the Ghana EPA. Please, over to you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind introduction. So this presentation is two parts. I'll do the first part and hand over the other part to my colleague, Andreas, who will take us to the end of the presentation. So here we are focusing on the standard operating procedures that is being developed under the Sustainable Recycling Industries Project, SRI, together with EPA and the Ministry of Environment. These standard operating procedures has to do with how a tool for regulators and inspectors and recyclers and how to improve the conditions that we find in some of the ULAB recycling facilities in Ghana. I must say that in Ghana, there are good examples of recycling facilities, but there are also very, very challenging examples of ULAB recycling facilities. Next slide. So in many low and middle income countries like Ghana, lead acid recycling is often conducted with unsafe and polluting methods. The picture you see on my left-hand side is a very typical lead smelting facility with all the fumes and the smoke coming out of the smelter and exposing people to these fumes. So uncontrolled breaking and drainage of batteries. So mostly these batteries are broken and drained before they arrive at the recycling facilities. We have also previously crude recycling by the informal sector. I must say that a lot of these crude activities have been taken up by the formal sector because of competition for batteries. There's also industrial substandard smelters who don't follow any effective EHS controls. So as I said, we have good examples of recycling, but also very challenging ones where environmental health and safety controls are not followed. Next, please. So what is the problem? Maybe, yes, bring me other slides. What is the problem? The pollution problem regarding ULAB is not only related to Ghana, but there are prominent cases, some of which were shown by the presentation by Jack. In Senegal, there are cases in Ghana, Nigeria, and in Kenya. In fact, in Kenya, effort by some pressure group led by Felix Omido led to huge fine by the Kenyan court against a ULAB smelter. And so that tells the scale of the pollution problem we face with ULAB. There is also a lot of public pressure for ULabs in Ghana. One of the companies was forced to shut down because the neighboring companies saw a lot of poisoning in the blood of their workers. So in the Union 3, there was a resolution to eliminate exposure to lead paint and promoting environmentally sound management of waste lead acid batteries. And this provides enough room for development. Next slide, please. So what is the approach? First of all, under the SRI project, and through the support of International Lead Association, Mr. Brian Wilson, who is on this call with us, we conducted useful inspection of these ULAB batteries recycling facilities using the benchmark assessment tool developed by the ILA. And this provided training for both the regulator and also the ULAB recycling facility. Next, please. So you have, no, please. Okay, yes. So you have issues of when we conducted these inspections, we saw that there were issues of regular maintenance of off-gas treatment system, which was not done. We also have exhaust pipe of diesel generators, which were too short, and a whole of other issues that needed to be addressed. Next slide, please. So this is a typical photo of the Kenyan example, where you have a ULAB facility next to a community, and this facility easily pollutes the community because of unsound activities. Next slide. So in a case of Kenya, before I come to this slide, in the case of Kenya, the idea was to shut down the ULAB facility because the Constitution of Kenya guarantees free air and clean air for everybody. In Ghana, we thought that we needed to document and provide guidelines for these recycling facilities to follow. And so the document that was needed and requested by EPA was a document that covers all the steps of the ULAB management processes. So from collection to the time the ULABs arrive at the recycling facility and all the processes that have to go through, the EPA requested that we needed to document them and provide guidelines on how it should be done. Number two, we need information on relevant EHS aspects, the do's and the don'ts for the facilities. And then we also needed a document that is understandable for both experts and non-experts, especially the workers who were in these facilities. And then we needed a document that is supported by pictures. Next slide. And so in all this, we came up with standard operating procedures. Now, how did we go around this, developing these standard operating procedures? First of all, we have the SRI program supported by the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, Innovation, and the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, these two agencies or institutions, or three institutions, have the Ghana National Cleaner Production Center, the Mountain Research Institute, where I work, and the Oeko Institute are the local project partners. So, next one, please. Next one. Yes. So, with these institutions, we also contacted the International Lead Association, of course, with Brian Wilson. We have the Battery Council and the Battery Association, Battery Recyclers Association, forming the Material Stewardship Initiative. We came together, these two organizations, through an MOU, and then to develop these SOPs. What are in these SOPs and how do they look like? I hand over to Andreas Manhart to continue from there.
Thank you very much. This is about what we produced in this partnership. First of all, I have to say that this was very helpful with industry experts who really know the details of how to manage a plant, how to recycle lead acid batteries involved. There was no financial flow between the two initiatives, SRI and Material Stewardship Initiative, but a very extensive exchange that continues until today. So this is an example of the SOPs, one of the sheets. So next one. It has a sheet number. Next one, you probably click it through. A subject, what the sheet is about, and a requirement. And the requirement tells you in a nutshell what a recycler has to do or should not do. And it has a scope. So where does this requirement apply to? It might require to collection point, to a transporter, or to recycler, or to all of them. So this is an SOP sheet which applies to all of them. There is also a background and rationale, and this tells the reader why the subject is important. What would happen if it was not followed? And a technical description, how can the requirement be implemented technically on the ground? And this is supported by pictures illustrating unacceptable and good practices. So we try to contrast that people who audit a facility really know how it should look like and how it should not look like. And a section on further notes, so where everything which is not covered above, but that is still relevant, is captured. Next one. Next slide. This is actually the table of content. So it's a collection of 37 sheets, and they're grouped in 2 chapters: the general requirements, plant location, licensing, industrial hygiene, safety, and the technical requirements along the recycling chain, from storage, packaging, transport, battery breaking, lead smelting, refining, recycling of byproducts, and management of off-gas, dust, slag, and residues. So next one, I already gave an impression on the sheet of the respirators. Now let's look on some samples. This is on the location of plant. Here, I don't show the whole sheet just to give an impression what it is all about. Left is unacceptable. This is a case Sampson already have presented, where a lead smelter was put just next to a densely populated area. This is, of course, unacceptable. To the right, there is a positive example where a smelter is located in an industrial zone, well removed from all other functions. Next slide. This is on bulk transport. So bulk transport of ULABs must be conducted in a way such that all ULABs are secure from damage. In addition, carriers must display decals labels to indicate the type of hazardous material, and staff must be trained and equipped for proper handling. So this is the type of language. This, of course, only applied to bulk transport. I would probably sketch out here that we also put in the types of labels that must be carried on each of the carriers to make it, easily understandable for everybody. Next example, please. So this is, again, unacceptable and good practice in terms of pictures. The left one is actually from Tanzania. The right one is an international shipment where we really try to explain what is unacceptable, also by the picture and short explanations under it. Next picture, please. When it gets more technical, it's of course challenging. How should an off-gas treatment system look like? So we try to bridge this in a way that we really try to do technical sketches, explaining that a cooling duct is required, a baghouse, an IP fan, a scrubbing tower, and of course the stack to the atmosphere, and explain the functions of each of the segments. And next one. Also have these comparable pictures. Left one is of course a smelter without any off-gas treatment, and right a picture how it should look like and how these elements look in reality. Next one. This is followed by an SOP, by a sheet that explains what to do with the captured particles, because having an off-gas treatment system is one thing, but managing the captured particles is another thing. If you release them again to the environment, there is not much gain. So this is an SOP that explains that basically all the particles you see below in the unacceptable pictures should never be released, but managed through enclosed systems and be fed back into the furnace. So we try to capture all these actually quite technical aspects in a manner understandable to everybody. Next one. And this is the timeline of the project. Basically, we signed the MOU between the SRI project and the Material Stewardship Initiative beginning last year. We took the lockdowns to work on the SOPs, and we had various online consultation rounds with practitioners, with industry experts to look the structure, the level of detail needed. And we completed the first draft set June this year. And we had an industry expert review in July, where operators of facilities across the world had a chance and helped us improving the sheets. And just some weeks ago, we had the first and the most important practitioner expert review in Ghana, where actually the auditors and the regulators in Ghana had a detailed look onto the sheets, followed by an industry consultation workshop. And now we're about to work in the last comments to be able to finalize and publish the material by the end of this year. It will be published under sustainablerecycling.org, which is the SRI website. Next one. So this is actually the impression from the commenting we had just recently in Ghana. We had 11 regulators, EPA and Department of Factory and Inspectorate present. We had also other experts commenting, amongst other from Nigeria and Ethiopia, who considered to impose very similar rules. And also we had industry representatives actually from the industry in Ghana. And allow me a comment here. There was said that 97% of ULAB recycling would be in the hands of the informal sector in Ghana. This is completely outdated. There are 3 large-scale industrial smelters, each having between 10,000 and 24,000 tons annual capacity, and they absorb the full market. Every ULAB in Ghana is going to these facilities. There might be informal collection and battery breaking, but informal smelting, as seen in the first picture, does not exist anymore. This picture was taken more than 10 years ago. So this is just a comment and also a strong claim. We have to regulate the smelters. The smelter are seeing a rush at the moment. African, it's high time for investment in ULAB recycling. And there are a lot of people coming in, investing in substandard smelters. They actually will absorb most of the ULABs if we don't put in proper regulation. The really high standard investment is needed. The informal sector exists, yes, but informal sectors, they mostly supply substandard big recycling plants. Thank you very much. This was my last slide. I'm happy to hear further presentations, but I also have to give a lot of credit to Brian Wilson, who is not presenting today, but who is part of the core team and extremely helpful throughout the whole process. Thanks a lot, Brian. You're also here in this call today and you deserve a lot of credit.
Thank you, Andreas and Sampson, for that. For those presentations. It's extremely heartening to see the progress that Ghana has made. And the SOPs that you're all working on and putting out are so illustrative, not only to help us understand all the ways that we need to be able to control the different sources of lead pollution at a ULAB facility, but I can also imagine that the world is eagerly awaiting the publication of those SOPs so that they can use them. And I can imagine you and Brian and everyone will be extremely busy coming up. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Terseer Ugbor, who is an expert and entrepreneur in recycling and energy efficiency projects. He's a consultant and a public policy expert with more than 17 years of experience and has a master's in public policy with interest in sustainable development and circular economy. Mr. Ugbor is founder and CEO of the Recycling and Economic Development Initiative of Nigeria and director and executive secretary of the Alliance for Responsible Battery Recycling, the producer responsibility organization for used battery management in Nigeria. He's developed policy and implemented projects on automotive recycling, scrap metals, used batteries, healthcare waste, waste tires, and waste oil projects in Nigeria. Please, over to you, sir.
Thanks. Okay. I think okay, let me share my screen. So. Thank you. Okay, so as introduced, I am the executive secretary of the Alliance for Responsible Battery Recycling. I am also founder CEO of REDIN, Recycling and Economic Development Initiative of Nigeria. I'm very happy to hear what is going on in Ghana. It seems to me that a lot of examples are very similar to what is going on in Nigeria. There's been some progress. The government has adopted the Extended Producer Responsibility Program to try to tackle the problem of waste battery management in Nigeria. And we're hopeful that with this program, that we're implementing with our producer responsibility organization, we hope to make a lot of progress going forward. So over the last 4 years, Reading, along with ARBR, the PRO, has worked towards collecting data and evidence of growing battery usage and recycling activities in Nigeria. Of course, we've worked closely with Andreas several years now on studies in Nigeria, activities and the pollution going on here. Nigeria has been found to be one of the highest polluting zones for
Terseer, can I ask you to put your presentation to full screen, please?
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah. So, Nigeria has been found to be a really high polluting zone for use by batteries over the last few years, and it's led to some kind of ban by the European battery manufacturers on buying scrap batteries from Nigeria. Now, when this ban happened, it kind of had a ripple effect where we had several battery smelting companies from India, from China, flood into Nigeria and establish relatively substandard facilities in Nigeria. And this has led to a lot of the pollution that we're seeing across communities, recycling, living close to recycling facilities in the country. Now, Nigeria, being the biggest country, the biggest population, the biggest economy in Africa, obviously has a lot more cars, a lot more renewable energy systems, a lot more battery imports and things like that. So we have a whole lot of batteries, battery waste, a lot of battery usage for several applications. And one of the issues that we faced here over the years is the disposal of batteries, and not just the automotive or the renewable energy kind of batteries, but also smaller batteries, lithium-ion batteries that have become very popular for energy storage projects in Nigeria. So there's a lot of awareness, a lot of work, a lot of interest in this sector now, and we're happy that the government is putting in place some policy towards addressing some of these issues. But as you can see from the photo, this was a photo I took recently at a battery collection site, or I'll call it, where batteries are just collected at the backyards of homes like this and are broken with machetes, and acid is just discharged into sewages, into the water, into the soil. And this is currently still ongoing. And the reason why this is going on is because most of the recycling plants in the country actually don't like to collect batteries with acid. So they don't give any incentive for the acids. So the collectors usually will have to break the batteries open, discharge the acids like this, and then transport the batteries to the facilities, and then collect whatever payment they can get per ton of this battery. So this is the practice, and it is going on because the value chain isn't strengthened enough to accept batteries with acids and things like that. Now in Nigeria, just like I think in Ghana and other parts of Africa, batteries are transported in trucks just like this. The smaller trucks are used to transport batteries, maybe from collection points around cities, to larger collectors, who then stack the batteries usually in containers, in closed containers, but not dedicated containers for batteries. So these batteries are collected in these trucks and transported to recycling facilities. This is not the recommended practice, but we're hoping that as more awareness grows, we can also begin to adopt a lot of the SOPs. Some of the recyclers have agreed to purchase dedicated trucks for used battery collection, and we hope that many of them who have registered on our platform under the PRO, under the Extended Producer Responsibility Program, will making a lot of more efforts to improving the practices. So this is an example of one of the recycling facilities in Nigeria. During one of the studies that we did, we found that this facility especially is really polluting, effluents being discharged into the environment, really polluting. And we actually wrote a petition against this facility especially, and we're lucky that the government, through the regulatory authorities, have appointed consultants to do salt tests, water and air pollution tests around this facility, and we're hoping that the results, we're expecting the results in a few days' time, and the government has shown commitment to actually close down this facility until we are sure that they are ready to make improvements on their project. So this is currently ongoing, and we're happy that government is showing steps. So of course, we all know the impacts of batteries, used batteries on the health of children, pregnant women, kidneys, and all that. I don't need to talk too much about that. So over the last year or two, we've done some studies on automotive usage in battery usage in Nigeria. So what we did was to look at the different sectors of the Nigerian economy and which of the sectors generates the highest amount of batteries. So by collecting all this data, we're able to design strategies to include the sector players into the extended producer responsibility program. So we looked at the automotive sector, and we could estimate that this sector alone generates about 5.4 million waste car batteries every single year. We also looked at the telecom sector. We had meetings with the regulatory authorities in the sector. They provided us information on the total amount of base stations and masts in the sector and all the batteries that is used to back up the facilities in the telecom sector. And we came up with some estimates on the amount of used batteries this sector also generates. And then we looked at the power generating sector, the power generators. A few years ago, the World Bank conducted a study and found that Nigeria, because of the poor power grid, has about an average of 17 million generators in the country. And for every generator above 3.5 kVA, there's a battery that needs, a starter battery attached to this generator. So this sector alone, from our estimates, looking at the type of batteries that they use, we estimated that 4.6 million waste batteries will be generated from this sector alone. And then, of course, the solar mini grid sector, which is the emerging sector for battery usage and disposal. And we found that from the mini grids alone, there are over 200,000 units of 200 amp batteries from this sector every year alone. And so this sector is growing very fast, and we anticipate that in a few years' time, the quantity of used batteries from the renewable energy sector alone will supersede that from the automotive sector. And then the banking sector, we looked at the ATM machines across the country, the average amount of batteries backing up all the ATMs in the country, and other uses that the banks use in the country, and we're able to estimate that this sector will be using and generating about 70,000 used batteries every year. This is just a very conservative estimate because we didn't even look at a lot of other uses that the banking sector adopts. And then, of course, the industrial sector, manufacturing, hospitality, commercial businesses, schools, hospitals and things like that. And in Nigeria today, almost every single private and public institution uses batteries as backup. This has become very popular in the country. It's a really growing sector, and of course, generating a huge amount of used batteries every year. Now, the reason why this is generating so much used batteries is because most of the batteries coming to Nigeria are substandard from India, from China, and a couple of other locations. So because of this substandard nature, the lifespan of the batteries is always very short, thereby causing a lot of used batteries to be generated every single year. Now, in total, we're able to estimate that Nigeria generates something like 186,000 metric tons of waste batteries every year. This is quite a big number, but we still think it is still conservative in the estimates because there's a whole lot that we don't know regarding the motorcycle sector and the tricycles and things like that that are really popular in Nigeria and all depend on batteries also. So we think that these figures could even be, more than this. And then, of course, the oil industry in Nigeria, there's a lot of batteries also there. So this is just a short list of some of the recycling companies in Nigeria. About 10 of them registered with us right now. I think a few of them had registered even a few days ago under the Extended Producer Responsibility Program. And then some initiatives that are also ongoing in Nigeria. The Heinrich Böll Stiftung, a German foundation, has supported us. We conducted the first study on used battery recycling in Nigeria in 2017. And since then, they've been very supportive with stakeholder engagements. And recently, they've also supported the development of the battery control regulations for the government. And they've recently also supported us on a statewide sensitization program to state ministries of environment and state environmental agencies across Nigeria to help them, bring them up to speed on some of the policies and regulations that are being put in place for battery management in Nigeria. And of course, the GIZ have also been very, very supportive, providing technical support to the Ministry of Environment on developing a national waste battery management policy that has just been validated and will soon be passed into law. They also supported us on a baseline study for used battery management in Nigeria. Currently, the GIZ is supporting an upgrade of several recycling facilities and collection plants, and they're also sponsoring a trip, a learning experience trip to Germany, where we're going to be engaging with battery recycling companies and manufacturing companies in Germany. They also supported us in developing standards for, battery standards in Nigeria with the Standard Organization of Nigeria. So Nigeria now has some standards for batteries so that we can elevate the quality of batteries coming to Nigeria and thereby reduce the incidence of used batteries that just keep on coming up in Nigeria. So quickly, I know.
Thank you, Terseer. Please wrap up. We're out of time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we've adopted the Extended Producer Responsibility Program. This is basically a sample of what it looks like. The PRO is at the center of everything, engaging with recyclers, collectors, producers of batteries, informal and private sector. Circular economy, you all know that. So yeah, so together we're taking responsibility for this problem in Nigeria, and we're happy that the sector is coming together, producers, recyclers, and manufacturers. Making a lot of progress there. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Terseer. It's really great to see all the multi-sectoral stakeholder work happening there, and extremely useful to see also that you're really thinking through the various uses of batteries, aside from vehicles, of course, that we're mostly familiar with. So clearly there is growing demand, and with us, batteries aren't going anywhere. And you also pointed out the transboundary nature of the problem. So thank you very much for your presentation. I'm pleased to introduce now Mr. Muhammed Omotola, Associate Program Officer in the Pollution and Health Unit of the Economy Division of the UN Environment Program based in Nairobi. Muhammed has led UNEP's work in Africa on chemicals, waste, and air quality at the Africa office, and supports UNEP's ambitious global effort in the implementation of a plan toward a pollution-free planet. Please, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rachel. Just share my screen. Let's see, where is it? Right, just so can you see my screen, Rachel? Can you just confirm that?
Yes, we can see it. Please expand it so we can see the full screen. Great.
Exactly. Super, fantastic. Great, so thank you very much, and great listening to all the presentations thus far. Happy to be here representing UNEP. So basically my presentation will look at just a bit of introduction around the UNEA resolutions, and also talking about the Africa Guidance Manual, which we're developing with the help of Pure Earth. And that will be just bring some points from the guidance manual, which is still almost at the finishing stages right now, and also mention some case studies. We also have two national strategies being developed on waste-lead acid batteries in Burkina Faso and Tanzania. So I'll just be sharing some highlights from there as well, and mentioning about the support we've received from the European Commission, who was the funding we received from them that has enabled us to, go ahead with this project, and also sharing some points on ongoing work and useful links where folks can find information around work on waste-lead acid batteries and other things that are happening within the pollution space in UNEP. So as was mentioned by one of the presenters, United Nations Environment Assembly had two resolutions, Resolution 27 and Resolution 39, which called for environmentally sound management of waste-lead acid batteries. And these resolutions did emphasize the importance of reducing the level of exposure lead, since no known level of exposure to lead is considered safe. So that is really the basis and the mandate for which we decided to work with our partners in ensuring that we have an ESM process for waste lead acid batteries. And such interventions, of course, it needs to have ensure that lead would lead to most benefit in terms of mitigating and reducing the adverse impacts of waste lead acid batteries, particularly as it affects human health and the environment, and of course promoting sustainable development. So one of the such interventions is the work we're doing with Pure Earth. I'm glad to see that a couple of Pure Earth's colleagues are on the call, and I think also there's been so much work that's been going on since last year on this guidance document, and basically recognizing that ESM of waste acid batteries is looking at a safe and sustainable handling and recycling of waste lead acid batteries in a well-regulated closed loop supply chain that protects human health and the environment. The guidance manual is based on the 7 unit pillars for ESM of hazardous waste and in the context of waste lead acid batteries. And just to mention them, it's one is the minimization of the generation of waste lead acid batteries by extending the life of the lead acid batteries itself. Secondly, also sustainable use of resources during the production, consumption, and recycling. This is very key because we actually have major programs on sustainable production and ensuring that there's a lot of circularity applied here. Also recognition that waste lead acid batteries are a resource for recovery of lead and other products. There's a big economic angle to it, as you've seen in many slides that have been shown by other presenters. The informal sectors are actually heavily working in this area, and also the fact that some of the materials being used in this process can also be applied into various forms of other materials, as you've seen in the first presentation from Jack, who has shown some images around the world, around Africa, basically, of what happens in the recovery of lead. Also, the adoption of an integrated life cycle approach to lead acid battery production and recycling of waste lead acid batteries is very, very important. And then the environmentally sound recycling itself of waste lead acid batteries as close to the source as possible, which is very key, so to avoid basically transfer of materials from one place to the other. I think there's a lot of pollution happening in the area of transport and also in terms of production as well. Indeed, there are not too many production sites in the continent, in Africa, but there's a lot of imports and a lot of transboundary movements for disposals and for and which of course is bound by many of the PECP procedures of the Basel Convention and so on and so forth. Also, there's strict controls on domestic and transboundary movements of waste lead acid batteries through the prior informed consent of the Rotterdam Convention. This is very important, particularly for countries that have parties to the Basel Convention and also the Baaku Convention as well. And lastly, the confirmation of safe and environmentally sound recycling of waste lead acid batteries. I think this is also very important in ensuring that there is enough process in place for safe handling and safe recycling practices, and also including bringing in the informal sector and making them processes that is more formalized. Then, of course, the guidance manual speaks to several case studies. I just highlighted a few here. We've also been other cases in the continent, but around 2008 in Senegal, there were a couple of incidents that affected 18 children under the age of 5 in terms of acute lead poison exposure to them, and also around some other parts of outside of the outskirts of Dakar in Senegal, where livestock and fishing environment were also affected due to exposure within the informal recycling processes as well. And also here in Kenya, where we are based in headquarters here, there's been incidents around the Mombasa area as well, where there's been also some cases of lead poisoning as well. So I think these are some of the highlights from the manual. The manual should be available for public for dissemination within the next couple of weeks, and we're very, very hopeful that we can get a couple of webinars in place as well to help with the dissemination, particularly in the continent around for Anglophone speaking and the Francophone speaking. So there's some planning in process for that. And once the guidance is manual is finished, then we can also build on that. Now we have, in terms of the national strategy for Burkina Faso and Tanzania, the strategy actually focus on mainly providing technical assistance to the countries in helping them to improve their management of waste lead acid batteries, and also reducing childhood lead exposure. And the strategy is pretty similar in the two countries, and they're basically to address issues around waste battery collection, safe battery transportation, the licensing for recyclers, inspection of recycling facilities, making sure that they're up to standard and up to best practices have been applied there. The relocation of course, informal recycling operations from residential areas to industrial zones, as you've seen in some of the images there in the image from the last presentation or the previous presentation. Also had cases around hazardous waste and contamination regulations as well, and providing also programs to identify and assess sites and contaminated by lead from unsafe waste lead acid batteries are recycling. And then, of course, looking at programs to assess blood levels amongst children at risk from lead exposure, and so on. So, in terms of the work done so far, there's been a lot of progress in Tanzania. In fact, the strategy is almost completed now, and that should be coming up stream soon. And there were a couple of workshops around validation exercises in the country, and we've had good multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder, and partnerships from across the different sectors and departments at the national level. Similarly, there's also a lot of progress in Burkina Faso, not quite as far as with Tanzania, but we're hopeful that that work can also be finished pretty soon, and then we can also have some of these exercises around validation work happening as well in the country. I should, of course, pay a special thanks to the European Commission, who has provided, through a much bigger project on pollution, health, and environment, €500,000 for a bigger project. And of that money, of those funds, we committing about €200,000 to this work, and which focuses really on output 3 of the project, which looks at the guidance manual, which I just talked about, and then of course the 2 pilot countries, which is happening. So I think this is really, without these funds, we would not be able to really do this work, and we really thank our European Commission partners for that. And like I said, we will be engaging in a couple of outreach and activities in the coming weeks and months to communicate the outcome, the results of this work. So also looking at ongoing work and useful links, currently we have ongoing efforts moving in parallel as well, in terms of developing a guidance manual, a global guidance manual on waste lead acid batteries, consistent with the Basel Convention technical guidelines. Again, partners Pure Earth is working with us on this. Again, on Africa, we are just about to conclude a $40,000 agreement with Pure Earth as well to do work in Ghana on areas of some assessments around storage and transportation of waste lead acid batteries. We've seen images already from Pure Earth colleagues Wilson in Ghana, showing some slides around the challenges around transportation of sound transportation of lead acid batteries. So I think this project will be looking to do some assessments around that and making some propositions for which further work can be done. So we hope to conclude those agreements very soon, and work can then commence in earnest in Ghana. In terms of the webinars which we're looking to undertake, like I said, we have in this given the 2 main languages, the continent and Africa region, we'll be looking to undertake this work in the next couple of weeks, as well to promote the guidance manual for Africa. Here, I have a couple of links here on the lead acid batteries work that UNEP is doing. You'd find that on unep.org under the explore topics on chemicals and waste. And then you can see that. And then also there's a link on beat pollution website as well. There we'll post the finished product from the guidance manual online for all our partners and stakeholders to look at. And then the last but not least is the issue around the chemical environment, health and pollution page as well, which is also quite linked again within the space of within our own website, and then you can also promote the guidance manual there as well. So this is just a bit of the information that we're doing at the global level, and of course narrowing down to Africa, and a lot of resources that are out there for our partners to look at. So I think with that, I'll just cut my end of my presentation. I would like to now thank everyone, and happy to take questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Muhammed. Thank you so much. I think many of those links would be really great if you could just share them in the chat so people can start clicking on them. In interest of time, we are running a bit tight here. Please do submit your comments in the chat box now if you have them. If we have time, we'll do. We would like to get to the ability to have the panelists do verbal answers. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce Lesley Onyon, last but not least. Lesley is working at the Chemical Safety and Health Unit of the World Health Organization. She's a toxicologist with more than 25 years of experience in the fields of chemical management, poison information, occupational and environmental health, both with the governments of UK and Australia, but also, of course, with WHO, UNEP, and OECD. She recently took up her post at the Chemical Safety and Health Unit at WHO after living in India, working with the WHO Regional Office for Southeast Asia. And in her new role, she is focusing on supporting WHO's work related to the poison centers, emergency preparedness and response for chemicals, and other normative work concerning prevention and management of heavy metals, particularly lead and mercury. So please, Lesley, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Could I just check that you can see my screen okay?
Yes, we can. It looks good. Thanks.
Okay, and can I just check how much time you'd like to give me? I can try to go through a bit more quick.
If you can do it in less than 10, that'd be great. Otherwise,
okay, we'll see. We'll see.
Ahead,
okay, so thanks very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, the purpose of my presentation is to give you an overview of some of the activities of WHO, what we're doing to prevent and manage exposure to lead. So primarily to reinforce the commitment that we have to supporting our member states to take actions to prevent exposure to lead in its many forms that we've heard about already this afternoon. So these activities are largely centered around technical information provision, partnerships, campaigning, and advocacy. As we've heard already, there are multiple sources of exposure to lead. There are also multiple health effects of lead. And I think the message that we'd like to give here is that many of these health effects go unrecognized by healthcare providers because there is not sufficient awareness of the dangers of lead. As we've already heard, it is a very widespread chemical pollutant where there's no known level of exposure without any harmful effects. When we try to, for policymakers, they often like to know what proportion of the burden of disease is caused by different risk factors. And so we've been trying to, over a number of years, to refine our estimates of the public health impact of chemicals, but we do still refer to it as the known and unknowns. And we certainly only know the tip of the iceberg. Our most recent estimates, which we released earlier this year, were that there was 2 million lives lost in 2019. And nearly half of those lives lost could be attributed to lead exposure. So almost 1 million lives lost due to lead exposure and resulting cardiovascular diseases. But we know that our methodologies are not ideal. We continue to have to refine them. And so this is largely going to be an underestimate. And we also would like to acknowledge the estimates of other colleagues and organizations, such as the estimate by UNICEF and Pure Earth that 1 in 3 children worldwide had blood lead concentrations greater than 5 microgram per deciliter. So we certainly recognize lead as a major public health concern. And as shown on this slide, the children are our main focus because of their special vulnerability. By placing lead in a group of selected chemicals, and we call it as our sort of top 10, but there's no priority order on this slide, we can focus efforts a lot more amongst our member states. And regarding the information that we routinely update, we're publishing technical publications, question and answers, fact sheets, and so on. And these are some of the examples that you'll find on our website regarding lead exposure and lead poisoning. But we're also very much engaged in partnerships with other organizations. And I think of all of the exposures that we've talked about this afternoon, I didn't remember anyone talking about lead paint. So this is my chance to put lead paint on the afternoon's agenda. It still is a significant issue, particularly among African countries. And since 2011, together with UNEP, we had formed a global alliance to eliminate lead paint, to prevent children's exposure to paints containing lead, and to minimize occupational exposure. The broad objective being to phase out or ban the manufacture of sale of lead paints. Since 2019, this work has been given an extra boost due to some funding made available through the Global Environment Facility. And this has been supporting approximately 40 countries to establish lead paint laws. And there's 9 countries in Africa in which we're working with more intensely: Benin, Ghana, Guinea, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, Zambia, Cote d'Ivoire, and South Africa. 70 governments and organizations are formally partners of the Lead Paint Alliance. And so this is a significant part of our focus. As I said, there's more to be done on lead paint, and this map, which was updated just recently at the end of August this year, shows that only 43% of countries worldwide have got legally binding controls on lead paint. And so there is much to be done. And as you see in this map by the yellow color, many countries in Africa have yet to establish these legally binding laws. This coming week, 24th to 30th of October, will be the 9th International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. And this is another activity that we coordinate to galvanize attention to the issue. And this has been an initiative of the Global Alliance to eliminate lead paint. However, the Poisoning Week does have a broader perspective as well. And so we very much welcome activities like this webinar this afternoon, as also contributing towards raising awareness of other sources of lead paint. If you're not familiar with the campaign website, I'd encourage you to go there. This is what it looks like on this slide. The slogan for this year is "Working Together for a World Without Lead Paint," to emphasize the need for multi-sectoral action. We have a lot of different materials on this website, some of which are customizable banners, slogans, social media tweets, and so on, which are easily usable. The next slide just gives a few examples of those, and the other technical information that's been developed on lead paint, measuring lead, methods for measuring lead in blood, measuring lead in paint, organizing advocacy campaigns, and so on. More broadly, WHO is working with its 194 member states to keep the issue of the need for stronger chemicals control and regulation in the mind of its member states, the ministries of health in all of the countries. And we have a resolution which is on the role of the health sector, because often the ministries of health feel that chemicals is an issue where they don't have a lead role. We produced what we call the chemicals roadmap to lay out particularly the activities where ministries of health do have a lead role in terms of controlling and managing exposure to chemicals, including lead. And this roadmap focuses in these 4 areas shown on the slide, but certainly includes a number of activities regarding lead, particularly public awareness campaigns, implementing WHO guidelines on the prevention and management of lead, and phasing out lead in paint as per the objectives of the Alliance. As part of this current International Week of lead poisoning prevention, we will be launching some new WHO guidelines for the clinical management of exposure to lead. And much of this work has been based on the very dramatic experience in Zamfara and other mass poisoning incidents where there was a real need to develop some evidence-based recommendations that physicians and healthcare providers can use to diagnose and treat lead exposures. So the new guidelines will provide information on the interpretation of blood lead levels, recommendations for gastrointestinal decontamination should children often are swallowing lead objects, which can become a source of ongoing exposure, recommended chelation therapy, and nutritional supplements, which can help to prevent the storage of the lead in the body. So these new guidelines, like many of our other activities, are aimed at the most vulnerable in our society. There's children under 5 years old, pregnant women, lactating mothers, and adults with high blood lead levels. The documentation is very extensive, as you can imagine, coming from WHO, but the rationale and implementation considerations is provided for all of the recommendations. And the recommendations have a very strong message that for all individuals with a blood lead level of more than 5 micrograms per deciliter, the sources of exposure and appropriate action to reduce and terminate that exposure is the essential step. So whilst the remainder of the guidelines provide these evidence-based guidelines on how to manage patients with very high blood lead levels and so on, the first step is to make sure that all sources of exposure are identified, and we'll be following up with some further guidance over the next year or so on providing further practical guidance in how to do that, how to identify hotspots and so on. So just wrapping up there, please go to our website for the International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, and there's a generic email which you can send questions to as well. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Lesley. There are a couple of points that I wanted to make there. One is, in addition to your presentation on lead paint, there's a very vigorous discussion happening in the chat box around lead and paint. There's certainly an imperative here to continue the work to eliminate lead in paint, especially because we want to ensure that we're preventing all potential sources. So where we have the ability to continue that work, we absolutely should be doing it, even though it may not be the majority of exposures in all countries. So as we saw from Jack's presentation, there's many, many different sources of exposure that we need to worry about. And I think that's also where the WHO guidelines that are coming out next week, and also the other ones that you talked about with regards to eliminating all sources of exposure, are really, really critical. And so between the different guidelines that you're putting out and those that Andreas referred to for his standard operating procedures for Ghana, I think we do have a really nice basis of examples and things, how regulations can be implemented and how the informal sector can be phased out and different things. So thank you so much for your presentations, panelists. We do have a couple of chat questions in the chat, and I'm not sure if they have been addressed already. There's a question here to Elsie and Wilson. From your presentation, I got the impression that the main source of lead in the environment in Ghana is presently from used lead acid batteries and its associated recycling activities. Are there any definitive studies for Ghana that indicate that lead that lead is not in paints, traditional medicines, or spices? Elsie and Wilson, please.
Okay, I think that has been answered in one of the chats. I answered by saying that there are studies that indicate that there is lead in paints, especially brightly or pigmented paint. One of mention is that of the IPEN one that bought paints of the open market and tested and recorded high numbers of lead in paints in Ghana. So yes, there are studies in Ghana.
Thank you, Wilson. And kind of following on that, has Pure Earth or any of these other partners done a source analysis for lead exposures in Ghana?
Yes, currently Pure Earth is carrying out a lot of field investigations at various sites to assess content of lead, especially in soil, in water. And all of these details are available at our sites called contaminatedsites.org, where visitors will be taken through all the details from site to site as to what values were obtained and other descriptions of these sites.
Thank you, Wilson. I'd like to turn it over to any of the other panelists to address some of these questions that just arise before I move on to the next one. Jack, no? Okay.
No.
All right, then on to the next question, which came from Christina Zuka from UNEP. What type of enabling conditions are needed to facilitate a transition from improper recycling of waste batteries to safe and environmentally sound practices on a large scale in Africa? Perhaps Andreas, you might want to tackle that question.
Yes, I have a position on this. I'm strongly convinced it's regulation and enforcement. As explained in the chat, at the moment, it's high time for ULAB recyclers investing in Africa. We don't speak of the informal sector anymore when it comes to smelting. So smelters set up operation in this country in large numbers, and they're coming in every month. So we see also in the smaller countries, big investments in smelters. And the business case is actually to take the lead and not care for much else. I don't say there are not good investors, there are also good investors, but those in the studies we have done with partners also here in the call, all point towards that the most profitable companies are investors that invest in a plant, but not in off-gas treatment or health and safety. They are the most profitable ones, but they have a license from the government. You can license them, you can challenge them, you can impose minimum standards upon them and force them to shut down if they don't comply. So I think there is a strong lever in this direction. And the informal sector, of course, is important, but they supply to this industry. So you can also tell these big smelters to impose rules on what batteries to accept and what not. They should supply drained, not drained batteries, but with the acid. So the smelters are the key entry point for improvement. And also the big energy access projects, they could also have policies disposing of the batteries only with high standard operation recyclers. So I think there are some levers behind it, but they must be on the smelters.
Thank you, Andreas. Would anyone else on the panel care to address that question?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, maybe I can just.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and maybe support what Andreas just said about the smelters. We have the same problem in Nigeria regarding the smelters actually asking, small collectors to dispose of the acid before they deliver the batteries to their facilities. And because of this, then you've created a situation where every battery collector breaks the battery open in their various locations across the country, discharges acids indiscriminately, and then transports the battery without acid. So I think the beginning point is with the smelters themselves. Once the smelters are required to collect batteries with acids, then the information goes down the chain, and then it becomes a regular practice in the industry, but it has to be a uniform practice. So every smelter has to collect batteries with acid. If not, if it's not uniform and it's not implemented across board, then it won't make economic sense for some of them to do that and some of them not to do that. So for it to be economically viable, it has to be a standard that is implemented and enforced across the entire battery recycling value chain and across all all companies who are involved in battery smelting in the country. Thanks.
Thank you, Sampson.
Yeah, so thank you. I think I agree with the 2 points shared by Andreas and Terseer. Here in Ghana, you have the ULAB sector operating under an economic program called Free Zones Enclave. And within these free zones, the companies are exempted from some types of taxes because all their products are destined for exports. Now, in this case, it means that you don't need further financial mechanism to enforce sound recycling. And that's why we are developing the SOPs here in Ghana. So I agree with Andreas, what we need for countries like Ghana who receive batteries from neighboring countries is to enforce standards for collection, standards for transport, and standards for operations, which are all outlined in the SOPs that we are developing. Now, there's a case where some of the companies are asking government to ban the export of these waste batteries so that they can have enough raw materials for their facilities. The question that arises is, which one do we tackle first? Is it a ban of export of these batteries, or improving domestic standards for recycling? And I often tell the companies that if you're able to improve your own standards within your facility with the support of these SOPs, then you give government enough reason to ban export of these waste batteries. Otherwise, then international shipment again will be the best option, because then we don't pollute anybody. This is my view.
Thank you. I think you've hit the nail on the head there with, it's almost a chicken and an egg with all these different things that have to come in and into play to clean up the practices and promote sound battery recycling. So I do see we're a bit over time. So I do want to thank everyone for your participation, especially our panelists. We have had a very lively discussion today. This session will be put up on our website. I do hope that you'll share that recording with your friends and colleagues. And again, this is the beginning of a discussion. We at the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution will be convening later this year into early next a coalition of partners who are looking to assist the world to develop a response to lead pollution in all of its sources, from batteries to paint and onwards. So we do look forward to engaging with you all there. So thank you so very much. I appreciate your time, and please do feel free to reach out to the presenters or to GAP for any further questions. Thank you so much.